Okay, thank you, Father. Thank you all for coming and for inviting us. The format is going to be, each of us are going to present paper of, can you hear me, or should I use that microphone? Let's see what this sounds. How does that sound?
Better.
You like that better? Okay, all right. Each of us, the format's going to be, each of us are going to present a paper of between 10 and 15 minutes. We're going to try to stay closer to 10, 1, 2, 3 in a row, and then we'll just open it up for more time than we speak of discussion. We really want to hear what you think about everything that's going on in the country and have a discussion about it. So my paper has 2 parts, and I might only be able to get through part 1 in my 10 minutes and cover the rest in Q&A. Part 1 is whether we really are on the brink of a crisis. Okay, so that was the title. I didn't pick it, but I thought to myself, is that true? And I think we are. And I'll explain why in a minute. And then part 2 of my paper is about what Pope Benedict with the Year of Faith and Archbishop Chaput with his book Render Unto Ceasar are asking us to do about this crisis we're on the brink of. All right, so the first one. I said that I think it's true to say we're on the brink of a crisis, and that means that we're on the brink of something that hasn't happened before. So what is that? I thought I would start by giving some examples of things that have happened recently in our country. One is that the governor of California, you probably heard of all these already, the governor of California a couple weeks ago signed into law a bill in the state of California making it now illegal in that state for any psychologist or counselor to do what's called reparative therapy on anyone under 18 years of age. Reparative therapy is when someone comes to the counselor who has same-sex attraction, wants to be counseled into becoming heterosexual, work through their past, whatever caused it. That is against the law in California right now for a counselor to do that. Just happened. Before, now, it would have been that counselors in California could pick if they're going to do that, if they're going to do that, or if they're going to think it's wrong to do that. And then a person who wants to go to counseling could pick which counselor. Well, now it's against the law to even offer it to someone under 18. Another example, which I'm sure you've heard of, is that in Massachusetts, in Washington, D.C., and in Illinois, Catholic diocesan adoption agencies have been forced to close because they wouldn't abide by new laws about same-sex marriage and provide children to people in same-sex marriages. So they've been forced to close. Before it would have been the Catholic ones could decide to offer the children that they offer to only a man and a woman who are married, and some other ones could offer children to same-sex, and people could choose. But now it's against the law in those states to be an adoption agency that doesn't offer that. Now with the HHS mandate, it's law now in our country that every insurance policy, which means every employer has to pay for contraception, sterilization, and pills that cause abortions. Okay, before now, it would have been that if a place like St. Agnes or St. Charles Borromeo Seminary wanted to not cover those things, they could choose not to, and another place could cover them. But now it's against the law. And now we have this 1-year reprieve. I have some thoughts about that. But so the definition of what's new, why we're on the brink of a crisis, is that in the not so distant past, those, for example, to pick another example, who argued before, like years ago, in favor of abortion, they just wanted abortion to be legal, okay? So these are people who presented their case, you could say, by rejecting what we call in Catholic moral teaching, moral absolutes. All right? I remember a bumper sticker I used to see, sort of disturbing, but it said, don't like abortion, don't have one. That bumper sticker expresses the idea that everything's relative. Okay, there's no moral. All right. Now, you might remember the Planned Parenthood versus Casey case in 1992, which was actually southeastern Pennsylvania Planned Parenthood against the governor, who wanted a law that would have all these informed consent, parental consent, spousal notification, 24-hour waiting period, and so forth. And it was rejected. It made it all the way to the Supreme Court, and it was rejected. And the Supreme Court expressed the famous mystery passage, which you've heard, in its argument that the 14th Amendment allows everybody the freedom to do whatever they want. They based it on this idea that no state shall make or enforce any law which shall. Oh, that's the 14th Amendment. Sorry, this is from the case. At the heart of liberty is the right to define one's own concept of existence, of meaning, of the universe, of the mystery of human life. So there's no objective meaning to those things. Everyone just gets to decide whatever meaning they want to import into those things. That was in a Supreme Court case. That's how they defended the 14th Amendment. Now, you might think, well, that's pretty bad. But the way it is now is worse than that, okay? So what that does, a statement like that rejects absolute moral truth that we creatures discover and learn to interiorize and obey. It rejects that, okay? Now, if you reject objective moral truth, then you have a void there, and something fills that void. And the thing which already in ancient Greece everybody knew to today, what fills the void when the truth is rejected is power. Whoever has the power decides what is true, and they impose it if there's no objective truth. That's what fills the void. The famous saying, might makes right. So, what are things like now? Well, now there is, for example, to take the example of abortion still, there is an international movement to make abortion a human right. So no longer are these power brokers arguing merely that abortion should be legal. It might sound odd to put it this way, but now those people who are in favor of abortion, they're actually granting the abstract idea, which they used to reject, that there are absolute moral laws. They're taking the natural law template, if you will. But then what they're doing, this is how I see it, my way of explaining what's happening, is they're taking the content of the true natural law out and putting in the opposite, all right? So that's what's happening. And then they're saying, now, if you don't obey these laws, you're going to be punished. You're going to be punished. So they've rejected their old relativism in favor of this. To make it simple, very simple, it's as if they've taken the fifth commandment, thou shalt not kill, erased it, and put in, thou shalt kill, and thou shalt support killing, in the form of abortion and euthanasia, for example. And if you don't support it, you're going to jail or you're going to be fined. Now, the examples I gave at the beginning of the paper are just a few. They're pretty dramatic, actually, in different states around the country. So I would express the brink of the crisis we are on like this. I think, I don't agree with everything that, for example, Governor Romney holds, but it does seem to me that if the current administration gets reelected, that this trend is going to explode. It seems to me that is true. Now, the answer to it isn't just an election or a candidate, although that can help. The answer to it is expressed by Archbishop Chaput and the Pope. Now, how long have I been speaking for? Okay. All right. Okay.
When the taser comes out,
I'll watch for the taser. All right. So that's what I think the brink of the crisis that we're on is. That's my way of explaining it. Now, if you've listened to Archbishop Chaput's homilies or read his book, Render Unto Ceasar, you've noticed that he's been calling us to participate in something that he calls Catholic citizenship. And he says things like, be Catholic before you are a Republican or a Democrat. And another statement I found in the book, which I found quite striking, he says, a foggy worldliness has entered the American Catholic soul. A foggy worldliness has entered the American Catholic soul. Now the Pope has just started a year of faith. It starts on October 11th, it ends next November. And one of the things that the Pope is asking us to do during the year of faith, very specific thing, is to read the Catechism of the Catholic Church and to read the 16 documents of Vatican II, to read them. And the way he wants us to read those things is slowly and meditatively. That's why it's a year of faith, okay? So when Archbishop Chaput says that a foggy worldliness has entered the Catholic soul in America, we should first, these two men are saying, I think, look inside ourselves to see which areas in our own minds and actions have become foggy. And so the theme of the Year of Faith is a new evangelization. And the Pope distinguishes the new evangelization from missionary work. Missionary work is when you go to a place where the gospel has not yet been heard and introduce it. The new evangelization is evangelizing people who are baptized and think they're Christians, but don't realize that they're foggy. That's what the new evangelization is. And that's the real theme of the year of faith. And that is why, so when Archbishop Chaput says Catholic citizenship, I came up with 4 meanings, and maybe I'll just give the quick sentences and we can unpack them during the Q&A that this could mean. What does the bishop mean when he says be a Catholic before you are a Democrat or a Republican? The first meaning of the 4 is that Catholics should judge each candidate's words and positions and individual policy proposals against Catholic teaching. That's how we should judge each policy. And that's one thing it means. The second thing it means to be Catholic first and then a party member is that Catholics should speak in the public sphere on policy matters. And when they do, they should have the courage to speak rooted in Catholic social teaching. This is the second meaning of that. The third meaning of be Catholic or Catholic citizenship is that Catholics should know their faith deeply, the content of it. And that's what I think both men are saying we're all weak on. That unless we actually interiorize, of course everyone in this room knows, okay, contraception, church is against it, abortion, church is against it. You can list the precise moral implications. But if someone on the street or on a bus or sitting next to you on the airplane said, could you please express to me in such a way that I could grasp whether it's sensible or not, why the church thinks marriage is only between a man and a woman? Could you do that? You can ask yourself that. You know what the church says, but can you explain it in such a way that a person who doesn't know the reasons why could at least say, oh, that's sensible. I don't know if I agree with it, but now I see why they think that. I think the Pope wants us all to be able to do that. Okay. And then the fourth meaning of a Catholic citizenship is that Catholics should live according to their Catholic faith. And here, I had some more notes there, but basically, if you listen to Archbishop Chaput, I've noticed in the book and in his homilies that he puts more of a priority on living the faith than on speaking it to others. But he says we should have the courage to speak it to others. But I think what he means is it's only if people are actually living the faith in such a way that they sort of embrace it and enjoy it and it's a source of fulfillment in their life. Out of that comes more convincing speaking, and people also will see that it's worth living that way because they can see it in your life. So I think it was a funny little story. I was at a meeting once in Europe. This will be my last remark, and there was someone there from Italy, a senator, who was an agnostic, and he wrote a book with Cardinal Ratzinger called Without Roots. And he was all worried that Marcello Pera, that Europe was losing its Christian heritage, but he was an agnostic. So he said, I don't want this to happen. So he put this proposal out there that Europe should be built on the scaffolding, if you will, of Christian teaching. But he said it doesn't matter if people are actually going to church or have faith, but we should have that Christian scaffolding. And so the question arose in our group discussion, could that even work? And we all pretty much concluded, no, it couldn't work. And Cardinal Schönborn was there. I just got lucky to be at this thing. And this point came up, and they said, well, how many people would it take? See, the thing is about truth, like Catholic social teaching, in order for a truth to have like a real impact on a society, there have to be people actually living it. That's a true statement. There have to be people living it for it to have an impact on the society. So someone was saying, well, how many people, I wonder, would it take? That? And the cardinal wasn't talking the whole time, and when he heard that, he just blurted out, 20%. And I think he meant it, I don't know if that's the right number. But so those are my remarks. That's what I think the Pope and the Bishop are calling us to, and we can discuss it later. So I turn it over to Mark.